You have probably heard this phrase before. Taxation is theft. It gets thrown around in internet debates, painted on protest signs, and screamed into the void of social media. Some people say it with a smirk, like they just uncovered the greatest conspiracy of all time. Others say it with genuine anger, convinced that every paycheck deduction is basically a robbery at gunpoint. But here's the thing. Whether you agree with it or not, this statement forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. What if they are right? What if the entire foundation of modern society is built on something we would call a crime if anyone else did it? Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a stranger walks up to you on the street and demands 30% of everything you earn this year. If you refuse, they will take your house. If you resist, they will throw you in a cage. If you fight back, they will use violence to stop you. We would call that person a criminal. We would call that theft. We would call that extortion. But when a government does the exact same thing, we call it taxation. We call it civic duty. We call it the price of civilization. So what is the difference? Is it just about who is holding the gun? Is it about what they promised to do with the money? Or is there actually something fundamentally different happening here that makes taxation legitimate while private extortion is a crime? Before we dive deeper, if you are the kind of person who questions everything and wants to understand how money really works in this world, hit that subscribe button right now. This is Money Trap Channel, and we are building a community of people who refuse to accept surface-level explanations. We dig deeper. We ask harder questions. And we are not afraid of uncomfortable answers. So subscribe, because we are just getting started. Now let us be honest about what taxes actually are at the most basic level. The government takes money from you without asking for your permission. You did not sign a contract. You did not agree to the terms. You were born into a system that already decided you owe them a cut of everything you make. And if you do not pay, there are consequences. Real consequences. They can freeze your bank accounts. They can seize your property. They can put you in prison. All of this is legal. All of this is normal. All of this is considered necessary for society to function. But strip away the fancy words and official documents, and what are you left with? You are left with forced transfer of property under threat of violence. That is the clinical definition. And if we are being intellectually honest, that is pretty much the definition of theft. The only difference is that we have collectively agreed to call it something else when the government does it. The people who make this argument are not entirely wrong. Taxation really is involuntary. You cannot opt out. You cannot say no thanks. I will pass on the roads and schools and police protection. The system does not work that way. You are in whether you like it or not. And that should bother us at least a little bit, because we generally believe that freedom includes the right to keep what you earn. So why do we tolerate it? Why do billions of people around the world hand over chunks of their income every year without starting a revolution? Well, the answer is complicated, and it involves everything from practical necessity to philosophical arguments about social contracts that you never actually signed. Let us start with the practical side. Imagine a world without taxes. No income tax, no sales tax, no property tax, nothing. Sounds pretty great at first, right? You get to keep everything you earn. But then what? Who pays for the roads you drive on? Who funds the schools that educated you? Who pays the salaries of police officers and firefighters? Who maintains the electrical grid and the water system and the sewage treatment plants that you probably never think about until they stop working? The hard reality is that society needs infrastructure. It needs systems. It needs organization. And all of that costs money. Somebody has to pay for it. The question is not really whether we need these things. The question is how we fund them and whether forcing people to contribute is morally justified. Some countries have tried to find clever alternatives to traditional taxation. The United Arab Emirates does not have income tax. Neither does Monaco or Qatar or Brunei. But before you pack your bags and move there, understand that these places are not tax-free utopias. They just get their money differently. Monaco, for example, has massive sales taxes that hit tourists and residents alike. Singapore has low income taxes, but will charge you 5 times the normal price to own a car because they tax vehicles into oblivion to pay for roads and public transportation. And then there are the oil-rich nations. They do not need to tax their citizens heavily because they have natural resources to sell. Alaska does the same thing. They give residents a yearly dividend from oil revenue instead of charging state income tax. Sounds amazing, except it only works if you happen to live on top of valuable natural resources. Most places do not have that luxury. But here is the sneaky part. Even when governments use oil money instead of taxes, they are still taking something from the people. Those natural resources belong to the citizens of that country, at least in theory. So selling them off to fund government programs is not that different from taxation. The government is still taking an asset that belongs to the people and converting it into cash to pay for public services. It just feels different because you do not see a line item on your paycheck every 2 weeks. So maybe the real problem is not taxes themselves. Maybe the problem is that governments need money at all. And this brings us to a wild idea that sounds crazy, but is actually taken seriously by some economists. What if the government just printed money to pay for everything? You probably asked this question when you were a kid. Why does not the government just make more money? And some adult probably told you it would cause inflation and left it at that. But the truth is more interesting and more complicated. Governments with their own currency already do this. When the United States government needs to spend money, it does not go dig it out of a vault somewhere. It creates new money with a few keystrokes and sends it wherever it needs to go. The trick is managing inflation. Money is valuable because it is relatively scarce. If you flood the economy with unlimited new cash, eventually it becomes worthless. You get hyperinflation, where a loaf of bread costs a wheelbarrow full of bills, and your life savings cannot buy a cup of coffee. Nobody wants that. But some economists argue that as long as you can create demand for your currency, you can keep printing money without causing runaway inflation. And the easiest way to create demand for currency is to require everyone to pay taxes in that currency. If the government says you owe them $10,000 at the end of the year, you need to get your hands on $10,000. That creates demand. That keeps the currency valuable. This whole idea is called modern monetary theory, and it is controversial as hell, but it does suggest that maybe taxes are not really about funding the government. Maybe they are about controlling inflation and keeping the currency stable. Which brings us back to the original question. If taxes exist partly to create demand for currency, and partly to redistribute wealth, and only partly to actually fund government services, does that make them theft? Or does it make them something more complicated? This is where things get philosophical. Some people argue that taxes are part of a social contract. You benefit from living in an organized society, so you have an obligation to contribute to maintaining that society. You did not sign this contract, but by living here and using the roads and calling the police when you need them, you are implicitly agreeing to it. Other people say that is nonsense. You cannot have a contract you never agreed to. That is not how contracts work. If someone provides you with a service you did not ask for and then demands payment, that is not a contract. That is a scam. Imagine if I mowed your lawn without asking and then sent you a bill. You would tell me to get lost. But when the government does it, we call it taxation. The anarcho-capitalists take this argument to its logical extreme. They say we do not need government at all. Every single service the government provides could be provided by private companies competing in a free market. Roads could be privately owned toll roads. Schools could be private institutions. Police and fire protection could be subscription services like insurance. Even the military could be privatized. In this world, you would only pay for what you actually use. No taxation, no government. Just pure free market capitalism where everything is up for sale and competition ensures quality and fair pricing. Sounds pretty good, right? No more forced contributions to programs you do not support. No more bureaucratic waste. Just efficient private enterprise delivering exactly what people want. But this system falls apart fast when you think about it seriously. What happens to people who cannot afford the subscription fee for fire protection? Do we just let their house burn down while the fire department watches? What about people with disabilities who cannot work enough to pay for their own survival? Do they just die? And even if you are okay with that brutal outcome, there are practical problems that make this system impossible. Consider streetlights. They cost about $2,000 to install and $100 a year to run. They provide safety and visibility for everyone in the area. But how do you charge people to use a streetlight? You cannot put a paywall on light. Anyone can walk down the street and benefit from it whether they paid or not. So in a purely profit-driven system, nobody would install streetlights because you cannot make money from them. The same logic applies to national defense, public parks, clean air, and a million other things we take for granted. These are called public goods, and they create what economists call the free rider problem. Everyone benefits, so nobody wants to pay, so nobody provides the service, so everyone suffers. The only solution is to force everyone to chip in, which brings us right back to taxation. Even the most hardcore libertarian societies throughout history ended up recreating something that looks suspiciously like government and taxes. Medieval free cities were run by merchants who charged fees and dues to fund common infrastructure. Private communities today have homeowners associations that charge mandatory fees and can literally take your house if you do not pay. Call it what you want, but forced contributions to fund shared resources are basically taxes with a different name. So where does this leave us? Is taxation theft or not? The honest answer is that it depends on what you value. If you believe that property rights are absolute and that nobody has the right to take what you earned without your explicit consent, then yes, taxation is theft. It is necessary evil at best and a fundamental violation of human rights at worst. But if you believe that we have obligations to each other as members of a society, that some goods cannot be provided by markets alone, and that ensuring a baseline quality of life for everyone benefits us all in the long run, then taxation is not theft. It is the price we pay for civilization. It is how we fund the infrastructure and services that make modern life possible. The real debate is not whether we need taxes. The real debate is how much taxation is justified, what we should spend it on, and who should pay what share. Should we tax income or consumption? Should we tax the rich more heavily? Should we have a flat tax or a progressive tax? These are the questions that actually matter. These are the questions where reasonable people can disagree without one side being morally bankrupt. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Both sides have a point. The taxation is theft. Crowd is right. The government takes your money by force. They are right that you did not consent to this system. They are right that there is something uncomfortable about the state having the power to seize your property and imprison you for refusing to pay. Those are legitimate concerns, and dismissing them as fringe libertarian nonsense misses the deeper philosophical problem. But the other side is also right. We do need roads and schools and hospitals and police and fire departments and environmental regulations and food safety inspections, and all the other things that make modern society function. Private enterprise cannot and will not provide these things efficiently for everyone. Markets are great at a lot of things, but they are terrible at providing public goods and preventing negative externalities. You need some kind of collective organization to handle these things, and that organization needs funding, and taxation is the least bad way to get that funding. So what is the answer? Well, there is not one simple answer. This is the kind of question that political philosophers have been arguing about for thousands of years, and they will keep arguing about it for thousands more. The best we can do is try to find a balance. Try to minimize the coercion while maximizing the benefits. Try to make sure tax money gets spent efficiently on things that actually improve people's lives. Try to keep the system as fair and transparent as possible. Is taxation theft? Maybe, but if it is, it might be the kind of theft we need to tolerate because the alternatives are worse. And that is okay. We do not need to pretend the system is perfect. We do not need to act like taxation is some beautiful expression of voluntary cooperation when it clearly is not. We can acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that government power involves coercion, while still believing that some level of government and taxation is necessary for society to function. The people who say taxation is theft are not crazy. They are pointing out a real tension in how we organize society. But the solution is not to eliminate taxes and hope for the best. The solution is to make the system as just and efficient as possible while remaining honest about what it really is. Thanks for sticking with us through this complicated topic. If you found this valuable, make sure you check out the next video that is about to pop up on your screen. We are going even deeper into how money and power really work in this world. This is Money Trap Channel, and we will see you in the next one.